Up on a comment which has been left by Water and Dust Walking, and says, this is really disappointing and an unfair commentary. This is about what I've said. Howie, talking about Josh Howie, wasn't on GB News, wasn't drawing an equivalence between homosexuality and paedophilia, nor critiquing the church. He was saying that paedophile organisations have tried to associate themselves with the LGBT movement by means of the undefined area represented by the plus at the end of the LGBTQIA plus. If you don't believe me, watch his segment dealing with the accusations, which is released as a YouTube video. Now, I watched his segment, but more than that, I'd actually watched the original GB News headliners show. It's now been censored, so the 7 seconds where he talks about this has been removed. But I'm going to play it here.
Trump criticises nasty bishop who made pro-immigrant and LGBTQ plus plea. So in a lengthy social media post on early Wednesday, Trump called the Right Reverend Marianne Edgar-Boud a radical left hardline Trump hater. Now, a lot of people would have seen this yesterday. She stood up.
That's actually, we've got a little clip.
Oh, great. OK, even better.
No, we're moving up in the world. We're doing...
Oh, wow.
There are gay, lesbian and transgender children in Democratic, Republican, and independent families, some who fear for their lives. And the people who pick our crops and clean our office buildings, who labor in poultry farms and meatpacking plants, who wash the dishes after we eat in restaurants and work the night shifts in hospitals, they may not be citizens.
This reminds me of exactly my gig on Saturday. That response there was pretty much identical.
We live in a free society, so do the US, and that's free speech in action. No problem with that whatsoever, but she hasn't got the memo, has she? Because God saved Trump so he could make America great again, Josh and Steve.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty... That takes some cojones.
It does.
To stand up there.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, when she dies in a mysterious car accident in 6 months' time.
No, the Clintons aren't involved. I didn't know that was a joke. Satirical.
But I was watching that thinking, you're barking up the wrong tree, love. I mean, it might be slightly wasted. With the look on his face, it wasn't going to change. I'm surprised by his response, though, because he didn't need to say she was nasty, attack her. He could have been... He could have just reframed it as like, yeah, we're really caring, and what we are doing is caring. So I'm not sure why it had to be picking a fight. Because surely, from his point of view, he's doing all the right things. Yeah. All of the things that she says, he is kind towards.
Yeah, and also, by the way, the type of church that she belongs to, the diocese, it talks about the full inclusion of LGBTQ plus persons. I just want to say that includes pedos.
Yeah.
You're doing the full inclusion.
How
there.
did she
Not
get the gig, Josh?
Has he got papers that he's shuffling? That sounds like a pre-arranged joke, doesn't it?
Did she get the gig, Josh?
Well, nothing like that, I'm sure, but I don't know what you're saying. All right, Mel, then. Mysterious words. Steve,
no, Josh Howie's comments on the headliner show and his and the ensuing backlash are interesting. What makes this episode particularly fascinating is the combination of outrage, institutional censorship that's now gone on, and an astonishingly laboured attempt at damage control by Josh Howie himself. To set the scene, on January the 22nd, during this discussion on headliners, GB News late night newspaper review, Howie made a remark about the church's endorsement of full inclusion of LGBTQ plus persons. He quipped, "I just want to say that includes pedos, right?" Yeah. It's a line that immediately triggered complaints and which interestingly has since been removed. And that is, if it was benign, why the scrubbing? So, you know, Josh Howie has done quite an elaborate defence of what he said, but I don't think that defence is implicit in what he actually said. And the problem is what is said is what goes out. And so Howie has embarked on this frantic exercise in clarification, insisting that the words were taken out of context. I've looked at the words in context. And although you can contextualise, you can elaborate afterwards, the words in context are offensive, it seems to me. He argues that he was not equating or trying to equate homosexuality with paedophilia, nor launching an attack on the LGBTQ plus community, but that's not how it comes across. Rather, he was making a broader criticism about how paedophile organisations have in the past sought to associate themselves with progressive movements. That might well be true, but that's not what actually he was saying. He cites historical examples such as the Paedophile Information Exchange in the UK and NAMBA in the US, as well as more recent debates around the term minor attracted persons. And yet, despite Howie's insistence this was all a joke, a comic aside gone awry, there is little question that his words struck a nerve, and over 60,000 complaints have now been filed with Ofcom, a number surpassing even the infamous Piers Morgan-Meghan Markle debacle in 2021. The Good Law Project is now pressing for official action as of February the... what are we now? We're the 14th. Complaints... 60,000 complaints have now been handed into Ofcom. This brings me to the heart of the matter. If Howie's defence is to be believed, and his joke was merely a satirical jab at the vagueness of the LGBTQ plus umbrella, and that's worth satirical jabs, why has GB News erased the clip? And why, if his argument was made in good faith, has it been so widely condemned? So the bottom line is, if the clip has been removed from the show, why is that if it's so inoffensive? It's a fair question, and one that points to the contradictions at play. Howie's subsequent justifications, aired on GB News itself, are framed as a plea for nuance, insisting that the 7-second clip circulating online unfairly distorts his intention. Yet even his own words, he inadvertently acknowledges the key problem, the increasing push to separate LGB from the TQIA plus community, an ideological split that has gained traction, particularly among right-wing commentators. Howie says that LGB must be separated from the broader queer movement, echoing sentiments that have fueled division within the community itself. But let's backstep for a moment and consider the wider context. The Association of LGBTQ plus identifies with that LGBTQ plus identifies with paedophilia. It's not new. It is, in fact, one of the oldest and most pernicious falsehoods used to discredit sexual minorities. Historically, such narratives have been wielded as a means of demonization, often in response to periods of social progress, from the AIDS crisis to Section 28 in the UK and the laws in Russia about the dissemination of non-natural lifestyles firstly to people who are under 18 and now to everybody. The idea that paedophiles are exploiting the LGBTQ plus movement to legitimize themselves is at best a fringe theory with very little empirical support, but it is a trope that has done the rounds again and again and again. And certainly groups have attempted to piggyback on other groups. But the overwhelming reality is the LGBTQ plus community has repeatedly and unequivocally rejected these associations. To suggest otherwise, even in jest, and this is the point, is to dredge up old slanders under the guise of just asking questions. And so what are we to make of Howie's insistence that he's a misunderstood gay icon, as he half-jokingly put it, or of his claims that he was merely highlighting an ambiguity in terminology? The answer lies in the nature of the GB News programme itself, a platform that thrives on controversy, thrives on pushing boundaries, but also works at a tightrope in an area where public accountability is no longer optional. I think this has been a clickbait option. It's been an editorial decision. Having got that clickbait, they've now removed the item. The removal of the original clip suggests a recognition that this particular provocation might have crossed a line, whether legally, ethically, or commercially. It's one thing to peddle outrage, it's quite another to invite legal scrutiny and record-breaking numbers of Ofcom complaints. So, watching the controversy unfold, one thing is clear to me: the problem is not just Josh Howie, it's the broader pattern of using minority issues as a wedge in culture wars, of weaponizing free speech as a shield for inflammatory rhetoric, and of retreating into context when the backlash becomes inconvenient. We see this in Westminster, we see it in GB News. Ultimately, Howie's self-defence feels less like a genuine attempt at clarification and more like damage control. If he genuinely believed his comments were harmless, then why apologise at all? And if they were indeed problematic, why not make the mistake fully? The fact that even GB News, no stranger to inflammatory content, has quietly removed the clip speaks volumes. As always, the question remains, was this an innocent joke, a calculated provocation, or simply another example of the messy intersection between comedy and ideology? And whatever the answer, it seems unlikely that Howie's status as a self-declared, quote, gay icon will shield him from the fallout.